Good evening, everyone. The peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all.
Also with you.
For St. Columba's, we're not going to jump up and do the passing of the peace right now. It's a simple greeting. Welcome to all who have gathered to this special event. We're so glad that you've come from St. Columba and from other churches to gather to meet the Reverend Amanda Currie, the moderator of the 145th General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. I thought I'd begin by reading a welcome statement that was adopted by St. Columba last year. At St. Columba, we strive to walk hand in hand with everyone on our journeys of faith, whether that path is clear or crooked, easy or exhausting, or sometimes feels like it is just going round and round in circles. Our community is strengthened, and we are enriched by the full inclusion of people of all ages, races, abilities, sexual orientations, gender identities, spiritual perspectives, and socioeconomic backgrounds. We are called to love and respect God's world and all the people who inhabit in it, working together to make our community one where God's love is truly known. On behalf of the session and congregation of St. Columba by the Lake Presbyterian Church, we welcome you, Amanda, the Reverend Amanda Currie. We're so glad that you've driven all that way from east of Quebec City to be with us. Amanda's been in Ontario as well for meetings. Bienvenue à St. Columba. Amanda Currie grew up in Ottawa at St. Giles Church. She graduated from Knox College and was ordained in 2003. After a 13-year ministry in St. Andrews, Saskatoon since August 2017, she serves First Church, Regina. She's a pastor with a passion for preaching, teaching, and pastoral care, and loves to sing and share in ministries of music with diverse styles. Amanda is very active in ecumenical work, has been convener of the Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations Committee of the PCC, and serves on the governing board of the Canadian Council of Churches. She is married to Nicholas Jessen, a Roman Catholic theologian who serves as ecumenical officer for the Archdiocese of Regina. She's currently studying interchurch families towards a Doctor of Ministry degree. God's blessing be upon your leadership and your church family, who allows you to be away quite a bit of the time this year. And we pray God's blessing upon you, and we look forward to your message this evening.
I always smile a little bit when I hear that part in the bio about how I'm working on my Doctor of Ministry degree, because when I wrote the bio, I was working on my Doctor of Ministry degree, but while I'm being moderator, I'm not working on my Doctor of Ministry degree. I will get back to it, I'm sure, I hope. I bring you greetings from the Presbyterian Church in Canada officially. And I also bring you greetings from First Presbyterian Church in Regina, where I serve as a pastor. I have been traveling a little bit over the last 12 days, and tomorrow I'll go home again. And so I'm going to share with you tonight a little bit of a glimpse and a little bit of a taste and a flavor of what I have been experiencing this year. We'll go with the first slide. Oh, it's up there already. Excellent. The General Assembly itself was the most challenging part of the year so far. I was deeply honored by the trust that was placed in me and by the significant encouragement and support that I received throughout the Assembly and following. Moderating was interesting, especially since we used two different methods of decision-making during this last General Assembly. We used the regular Presbyterian method of recommendations, discussion, and voting in favor or against that some of you are used to from session or presbytery meetings. But we also tried out using a consensus decision-making method that is used by some of the other churches and by many ecumenical bodies. Its aim is to have a less divisive environment for discussion and to work together to find consensus rather than debating opposing or polarized views. This was a difficult change for the commissioners to get their heads around, and so we did get caught up at times in the process. Although the Assembly Council continues to use consensus decision-making in their meetings, the decision has been made to use the traditional model for the 2020 General Assembly. Next slide. There were difficult parts of the Assembly, and this slide represents one of them. It's perhaps a little faded, but this was a moment in the Assembly that we spent marking the fact that it has been 25 years since our church first made our confession to Indigenous people in Canada and to God for our participation in the Indian residential schools system and the impact that that had on our neighbors. So that was one of the very difficult parts of the Assembly, but also one that calls us to continue that work of living into the confession that we made way back in 1994. And there were fun parts of the Assembly. Next slide. Those are the young adult representatives that were at the General Assembly, and they represent, that's them at the end of the Assembly, looking very joyful. And they represent some of the great enthusiasm and commitment. Of course, the commissioners that were there were all committed people. But I find that the young adult representatives that go to Assembly every year bring fresh perspectives and contributions and energy and creativity. And this particular group of YARs they read all the reports. They thought about them deeply, and they made really significant contributions to the Assembly. The next. And I admit that I was thankful when Assembly was over. And since then, this being moderator thing has been relatively enjoyable. There has been a fair amount of letter writing and that sort of thing, and I've attended a lot of meetings, as every moderator does. There was the PWSMD meeting in Calgary back in the fall, an opportunity to get more engaged and know what's happening with Presbyterian World Service and Development. I know that's close to Lara's heart. Were you a convener of that committee at one time? Yeah. So a very important part of the work of our church. I've also attended Life and Mission Agency meetings. Oh, there's PWSMD. And let's do the next one. That's the Life and Mission Agency Committee. If you're not familiar with that, that's the branch of our national office that works on program-related things. So every kind of program, in fact, PWSMD falls within Life and Mission Agency, but whether it's Canadian ministries, international ministries, justice ministries, ministry and church vocations, anything that has to do with the life and work of our church falls under that department. And of course, there's an overseeing committee from representatives from across the church. I've also attended Assembly Council meetings, which is more of the governance kind of side, the polity side of our church, overseeing things in that way. And I had no pictures. No pictures from Assembly Council. It was a tough meeting in November, dealing with governments and dealing with legal issues and that sort of thing. And let's go to the next one. This is a picture of the Canadian Council of Churches Governing Board, and I don't attend that meeting technically as moderator, but I've been attending it for a few years, and it has been interesting to be in the role of moderator while I've been at those meetings, together with 26 member denominations from Canada, different denominations within Canada that meet together and work together. And of course, it has lots of subgroups that work on theological dialogue and also work on justice issues. And many representatives of the Presbyterian Church in Canada participate in various aspects of that work. We are a small denomination, but we engage very, very deeply in all the aspects of that ecumenical work through the Canadian Council of Churches. In January, I attended a couple of retreats, and here's the first one. This is at Crieff Hills community in Ontario, not too far from Guelph. And I went to a Presbyterian women clergy's retreat at Crieff Hills. It was kind of it wasn't advertised all that widely, but it was sort of a pilot project to see how it might go. And it was a privilege to be able to spend time relaxing and retreating with other women clergy, sharing about the struggles and the joys of ministry in a retreat setting. And the next one is another retreat with the Canadian Council of Churches Church Leaders Retreat in Toronto. There have been other things going on during this year, like listening sessions about the remits, presbytery discussions about the remits, plenty of online debates and conversations about the remits about human sexuality. But I have not been directly involved in most of that. Much of that work has been happening through the Life and Mission Agency staff listening, and the presbyteries doing their work of discernment together. I have stepped back from engaging in online debates and that sort of thing, but I have been paying attention and watching what's happening in our church, and everywhere I've gone, we've had conversations about the remits in more informal kinds of ways. So mostly this year, next slide, has been meeting people, listening, learning, bringing greetings, and preaching. Lots of fun stuff, actually. That slide represents fun stuff. Number 12. You may know that I chose ecumenism as my theme for the year. So I've been prioritizing time for ecumenical engagements. I visited a couple of congregations that are shared ministries between different denominations. So I visited Calvin Presbyterian and Deer Park United Church in Toronto. And the picture on the left includes Emily Bissett and her family, and Emily is the Presbyterian minister who serves at Calvin Presbyterian, and they share their building with a United Church congregation, and the two congregations worship together regularly and do lots of other programs and work and Bible study and outreach together, and they each have a minister, and they share together in that work and in very creative kinds of ways. The other picture up there is of Peniwa Christian Fellowship in Manitoba, which is a little bit northeast of Winnipeg. And Rob Murray is in the middle of the picture. He's the Presbyterian minister who serves that congregation, which is a combination of Presbyterian, United, Anglican, and Mennonite. And it's officially claimed by each of those. So Rob actually participates in the Presbyterian presbytery, but also participates in the governing bodies of all four denominations. And they have members in their church that come from all four, plus a few extras that may not belong to those four as well. It's a beautifully ecumenical community. The other person in the picture is the Anglican bishop, who happened it worked out that he could come and visit the congregation on the same day I was there. And so I preached and he officiated at communion, and we had a good ecumenical celebration. Now, I want to add one more picture here, but I haven't got all the pictures downloaded yet, because this morning I was able to be up in a little further north and east in Quebec, at St. Andrew's in Inverness. And there I worshipped with an official Presbyterian United Church congregation, a shared ministry. And the minister there is a Presbyterian, Barb Fotheringham, who serves a 3-point pastoral charge, including St. Andrew's, a shared ministry between those two churches, as well as a United Church in Thetford Mines and a United Church in Kinnears Mills, and they do it all together. And this morning, when I preached for their service, they also had about a dozen Anglicans who came to join us. A beautiful ecumenical community in a place where they're thinking creatively about how they can be the body of Christ in that community, particularly to be the mostly Anglophone part of that wider community and supporting one another. So let's do the next slide. I attended the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops Plenary Assembly in Cornwall back in September. I described it as kind of like the General Assembly for bishops. And this group always invites a good number of ecumenical guests to the first couple of days of their meetings. And with his Canadian Council of Churches hat on, President of the Canadian Council of Churches, Stephen Kendall, who some of us also know as the principal clerk of our General Assembly, had the honor of addressing the Assembly of Bishops this year. I was just happy to be there and meet with people and share stories and learn about one another. I also attended a kind of ecumenical wedding in early October in Winnipeg. It was the signing of a new covenant, a full communion agreement with exchange of ministers between the United Church of Canada and the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in North America. Now, I know you all know the United Church of Canada. You may or may not know the Disciples. They often get shortened just to Disciples, but they're another denomination within the Reformed family. Not a big denomination in Canada, but they do have a number of congregations here. And it was a pleasure to be with them, to witness a kind of a coming together in a formalized relationship where they will be able to share more deeply in those relationships. So if ministers, for example, happen to be ministering in a United Church of Canada congregation, and at some point they feel called to a Disciples Church, they could go and serve there too, and later on they'd be able to go back without doing formal changes between those. And it is also a way of encouraging ecumenical sharing between congregations. Next one. In October, I also spent a couple of days at Knox College and was very happy to be invited to preach at the Ecumenical Agape service for the Toronto School of Theology. In this picture, it looks like it's just John Vissers in the Knox College chapel. And I know some of you know John Vissers because he was in this area before he was at Knox, but actually it's just taken from a funny angle. The church is actually full of students and faculty from all 7 colleges. It was a wonderful opportunity to encourage and support the Toronto School of Theology in their ecumenical collaboration and relationship building. Next. I couldn't pass up the opportunity to connect with students, encourage them in their vocation, and talk to them about ecumenism. And so I did it again in January at the Vancouver School of Theology, preaching at VST during the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, preaching at St. Andrew's Hall on an ecumenical theme as well, and spending time with students in classes and other conversations. Next slide. In this picture, this is some of the students that I met with. We had a Q&A session, probably similar to what we'll have a little bit later on tonight. And I also got a chance to sit in on a couple of classes, and this picture was from the church polity class. So I guess it was unusual to get the moderator there for a discussion of governance and, to share about my experience of what it's been like being in this particular role. I thought one of the neat things about that picture is that you see there are students on either side of a screen, and there were actually 5 students, which are in the picture, that were participating in the class from a distance, some from the States, some from different parts of Canada, and they were able to participate very well through video conference, and they were able to ask questions and participate in the conversation in a very engaging way, creative ways of doing theological education. Now, being here in Montreal, I can't help but think, I'm so sorry that I don't get to go to Presbyterian College, but I had hoped that it would actually happen this week, but apparently it's the school break week. And so that didn't work out, and things were in flux at Presbyterian College, so I'll have to leave that for another time, and probably next year's moderator will be able to visit Presbyterian College. Back in September, I also preached at the 75th anniversary celebration for the Canadian Council of Churches in Toronto at York Park Baptist Church. And the next. But I was home in Regina for the main event of the Canadian Council of Churches 75th anniversary, which was a cross-Canada video conference with panelists in various places and gatherings of Christians in different cities across the country as well. I was pleased to work with the clergy at the Living Spirit Centre in Regina to host a local event. Living Spirit is another ecumenical shared ministry, in this case with 3 congregations that are Lutheran, Anglican, and United, sharing one church building on the east side of Regina. The theme of the Cross Canada event was generally about being Christians in Canada today, with an emphasis on the need for continued engagement in healing and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, practicing what we preach, and engaging in justice work on the margins. The panelists were a diverse group of Christian leaders with different backgrounds in different parts of the country. The Reverend Mary Fontaine was one of them, bringing her Presbyterian, Indigenous, West Coast experience, along with a good prairie background as well, having grown up at Mistawasses in Saskatchewan. Next slide. I've also been taking up opportunities to give some talks about ecumenism. In September, I presented at my home congregation, St. Giles in Ottawa, a basic Ecumenism 101 through the lens of the interchurch family experience. Others from the Ottawa Presbytery and ecumenical partners from the neighborhood also attended and joined in the discussions that followed. Next slide. I repeated it in Stayner, Ontario, as part of the congregation's 160th anniversary weekend in November. And that's the Reverend Darren May and his family who serves there. And the other picture, let's go to the next slide. I forget what's on which one. The Reverend George Vise happened to attend that event, and so I got a picture with the moderator of the 1994 General Assembly 25 years before me. So I thought that was pretty fun. In Burnaby, a couple of months ago, I participated in an ecumenical conversation on the same topic I've been talking about at Brentwood Presbyterian Church with Anglicans, Presbyterians, and some others. Unfortunately, I forgot to take a picture at that particular event, but I was laughing as we were coming in tonight and having conversations about how your congregation got rid of your pews at one point and replaced them with these very nice, comfortable chairs. They look almost the same as the chairs in Burnaby at Brian Fraser's church. So I don't know if there was a family discount or something. Pretty cool. Let's do the next slide. Last month, I did the workshop again on ecumenism at an ecumenical gathering in Saskatoon. And then in a mostly Presbyterian setting at Creef Hills Retreat Centre in Ontario for one of their Manna Days. I don't remember if I put a slide in. No, I didn't. Okay. I haven't updated. That was only last week, so didn't add it in. The title of the talk that I have been giving, and I'll share a little bit from it with you, was The Scandal of Division and the Promise of Unity. Because interchurch families experience the brokenness and division of the Christian church in a particularly deep way because it is always before us. Week by week, as we participate in two separated Christian traditions, we come face to face with our divisions. But interchurch families also find ways to cross boundaries, to share the gifts of more than one Christian church, and to bring the churches together through our love and commitment to both communities. Now, I should pause and make sure you know what I'm talking about when I say interchurch families. A paper adopted by the Second World Gathering of Interchurch Families from 11 countries held in Rome in July 2003 defines interchurch families in this way. An interchurch family includes a husband and wife who come from two different church traditions, often a Roman Catholic married to a Christian of another communion. Both of them retain their original church membership, but so far as they are able, they are committed to live, worship, and participate in their spouse's church also. If they have children, as parents, they exercise a joint responsibility under God for their religious and spiritual upbringing, and they teach them by word and example to appreciate both their Christian traditions. Now, there are other options when Christians from different traditions marry one another. Someone could switch churches. We sometimes say convert. Or someone could stop participating in their church even if they don't really take up going to the other church. Or both could stop. Sadly, that actually happens a lot because couples find it difficult to work out. Or the two could each do their own thing on Sunday mornings and worship separately in their two church communities. Interchurch families choose to keep both, to participate in both, and to share both together as couples and families. For some, that means alternating Sundays or going back and forth on some kind of flexible schedule that works for them. For my family, it means that my Catholic husband always worships with me on Sunday mornings at my Presbyterian church, and we worship together in a Catholic parish on Saturday or Sunday evening every week as well. Now, sometimes people, even in my Presbyterian church where they know him really well, they sometimes forget. They sometimes sort of think, well, he must have switched at some point. He must have become a Presbyterian. But then we remind them of that we're both going back and forth together, and we're actually participating in both communities. So I'm probably a pretty rare Presbyterian minister who goes to Mass pretty much every week. Since we are both people in ministry, as my husband currently serves as the ecumenical officer for the Archdiocese of Regina, we work together to build good relations between the churches in our community. Our interchurch identity causes us to experience the scandal of division on a regular basis. We're very aware that we go to two different places to worship every week, and the communities cannot yet gather around a common table to celebrate the Lord's Supper as one church. We regularly hear misunderstandings and stereotypes about the other church, and occasionally even hateful sentiments against the other. Now, things have changed a lot in the last 50 or 60 years, and interchurch families who were trying to make that work 50 years ago experienced a lot more challenges than we do. Things have improved a lot. And we also experience the promise of unity week by week. We experience that in the fact that we can pray and worship together, that we can share in each other's religious traditions, that we can work together on various projects and missions, and that most of the time our churches welcome and embrace us into both of our church communities. I remember back when I was a student and I was going through the guidance conference process when you're discerning your call to ministry, I remember going to guidance conference and thinking, I'm about to get married to a Roman Catholic. How much of a problem is this going to be? And I was really worried about what the response would be of the counselors, of the Presbyterian ministers in that discernment process. And I came home going, oh, it wasn't a big deal. Nobody seemed to care. It was all good. And now I am the moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and nobody seems to mind. So things have changed in the last 50, 60 years. Because interchurch families experience both that scandal of division and the promise of unity, I believe that we are uniquely positioned to share from our experience and to call the churches to continue the work of ecumenical dialogue, to keep on working on our cooperation and relationship building that we really need to lead us towards greater unity, and eventually to the fullness of unity that is Jesus' desire for us. Now, when we start talking about unity, we often ask, well, what's that going to look like? Are we talking about we're all going to become Roman Catholics? They sometimes call that return to Rome. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about the kind of unity that our denomination says is our ecumenical goal, which is to get to a place where we can recognize each other's ministries, where we can recognize each other's baptisms, which we do mostly, and where we can gather around the Eucharistic table, the communion table, with fellow Christians all around the world from all the different churches. We don't want to lose the distinctive gifts of our traditions, but we do want to be able to come together and share in the richness of the whole church together. And so I wonder if you have any people in your congregation, or in your extended family, or in your networks of communication and friendships where people are married across denominational lines. I would encourage you, if you do, or if you don't know if you do, to become aware of them and to open up a dialogue about how that is working for them. Mixed couples need pastoral support and care of clergy and communities in order to make good plans for living out their faith as a couple and family. There is no blueprint for how to do it, but there is the experience of other interchurch families, and the possibilities are much more open than most people assume. If you have been reading some of the reflections I've been including in the Presbyterian Connection newspaper this year, you'll know that one of my favorite ecumenical quotes these days is from Cardinal Mercier of Malines, Belgium. It is becoming a bit of a theme for my reflections this year. And I think I've got it on a slide. There we go. In speaking about ecumenism and the call to Christian unity, Cardinal Mercier said this: "In order to unite with one another, we must love one another. In order to love one another, we must know one another. In order to know one another, we must go and meet one another." One of the frustrations that interchurch families experience is that the divisions between the churches continue while we are already united. We're united in our marriages, we're united in our baptisms, but because of the church's inability to come together, we're very often separated at communion. Interchurch families have gone through those steps of meeting one another, getting to know one another, not just as individuals, but also our particular traditions. We've fallen in love with each other, and sometimes fallen in love with each other's church communities. They have become our families as well. We've made covenant promises of love and faithfulness, and we are united. And what we need now is for the churches, the wider churches, to do the same. To do the hard work of going and meeting, learning and building relationships, and growing in love until God makes us one church. Cardinal Mercier's testament has been coming to mind frequently as I've been going about my moderator duties as well. I imagine that other moderators have experienced something very similar. It's a lot of traveling, going and meeting people, congregations, presbyteries, missions, partners, meeting people where they are at. And often I don't have to do a lot when I'm there except to listen and get to know people. Next slide. My international trip took place in September. We went to visit the Reformed Church of Hungary and the Reformed Church of Romania. And I could tell you lots of stories about what we saw and heard and experienced. Besides the Reverend Linus Williams from